I also want to take this opportunity for those who are visiting today or who are our guests today. We do have that picnic. It's right down the street here near the Carillon, and it's at a shelter that you can see there. And you are invited also. You don't have to bring anything. You don't have to run out to the store and get anything. We got plenty, okay? So please feel free to join us after the service at our picnic. There was a minister and a music director who didn't get along very well. And they always were challenged with one another. And now I'm not talking about Nancy now, okay? She's glad to hear that. And so, anyway, this music director and the minister still had all kinds of challenges. And so the minister one Sunday prayed or spoke on tithing. And the music director played the song, Jesus Paid It All. Then the minister, a few weeks later, spoke on forgiveness. And the music director played and sang, I shall not be moved. And then, a while later, the minister resigned. And the music director had the congregation sing, what a friend we have in Jesus. Did you not catch it? I thought it was funny. But anyway, okay. You know, we've talked about a number of things over the last few weeks about your spiritual heart, the spiritual heart. And that's what we really are. And we talked about love to millionth power, that when we come from our spiritual heart, we can love ourselves, and when we love ourselves, we can love others unconditionally. That is love from millionth power. Then we talked about heart connection, how we are actually connected to our heart as I demonstrated during the meditation. And then we talked about activating that spiritual heart. How do we put it into play? How do we use it in such a way that it becomes practical and becomes a habit? And this week we're talking about living from the wisdom of the heart, which can be really powerful and is powerful. Charles Fillmore, who is the co-founder of Unity, said in a revealing word, the heart is love. It is the affectional consciousness in man and woman. It is the faculty through which man receives love from being. The heart, however, is but the visible expression of an invisible center of consciousness. In other words, we're not talking about the physical heart, we're talking about a heart space, an energy that does come from the heart. And he said, it is the center from which the divine substance is poured forth. Everyone uses his heart center when he sends forth a loving thought. And every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, we send through prayer loving thoughts. And they have results, by the way, because I get feedback on them. He also said in one of his books, and I don't know which one, but he said the heart space is where we can experience the kingdom of heaven, which resides within each of us. Where we can literally experience that kingdom of heaven. You know, Jesus kept saying, the kingdom of heaven is within you. He never once said the kingdom of heaven will be there right after you die and when you go somewhere up there. Never explained heaven that way. The church has over the centuries, but he didn't. He said the kingdom of heaven is within you. And I think what he was talking about, metaphysically, is that the kingdom of heaven comes from that heart space that we're talking about and been talking about. There's an organization, and I've mentioned it before, called HeartMath. That's located in Northern California. And they have been investigating and measuring the power of heart energy and providing a way of thinking from the heart, of speaking from the heart, and acting from the heart. They have a machine called MeWave. And MeWave is kind of like an EKG, if you would. And it measures the activity of the heart. And one of the things that they've discovered, if somebody's angry, if somebody's upset, if somebody's living in fear of something, if somebody is concerned, what happens is the heart on the MeWave becomes incoherent. It's bouncing all over the place. It is in chaos. And isn't that the way we feel and we experience life when we are in that situation where we don't know what's going to happen and we feel like we're living in fear and we're wondering what's wrong and we're trying to forgive somebody, we're not able to do it? Isn't that the way that our lives show up? Incoherent. Yet what we know is that when we become coherent, when we go to our heart space, those waves show a coherent pattern, just kind of like a good EKG, okay? Think about it that way. And so therefore, what happens is we are able to move from the chaos of the incoherent to the peace, to the joy, and the clarity of being coherent. You can't make good decisions when you're all frustrated and upset in the middle of something. You have to take a step back and move into a position where your heart, your mind, is in control of your brain. The brain is a memory instrument. It remembers all the kinds of stuff that's happened to you. And we're really pretty good at having situations where we are touched, not with love, but we are touched with whatever happened before of a similar nature. And when that happens, we aren't stepping into a coherency, we are stepping out of love itself. And as we do that, we learn to grow. Now, I was in a Unitarian church a few years back, and I spoke about Buddha's brain. They had seen it on the internet and on our YouTube, and they asked me to come and speak about it. It's kind of an interesting experience because I said in the Buddha's brain, the scientists and the psychologists together say that the mind creates the brain so we can become aware of our level of consciousness and awaken to a greater understanding of what I am. Those Unitarians had a little trouble with that. And they're saying, well, I thought the brain and the mind were the same thing. And I'm saying, no, I don't think it is. And we had a discussion about it. Matter of fact, they interrupted right in the middle of the talk. Hey, let me ask you a question about it, because that's what they do. And it was a good experience, believe me. But it was interesting because there's some people just didn't agree with that because they were into science alone. And they admitted that. Science was their God at that moment. And I'm not criticizing them, I'm just simply saying that's where they were. And as we talked about it, they began to get a little different idea on it. Not that they agreed totally, but they understood maybe what I was talking about. Because you see, it is through managing the mind that we are able to be authentic and live abundantly and see in each person the love and beauty that they are. Now, one of the things that happens, especially for men, because women seem to be more naturally intuitive, not all, but many, is that when men start to use this heart treatment, start to think from the heart, they become intuitive all of a sudden. Because you see, when we're intuitive, logic doesn't have to drive us. As a matter of fact, sometimes when we're intuitive, the logic makes no sense. There was a situation back when I was taking licensed Unity teacher classes, and I was flying to Unity Village, and I was doing it 2 weeks at a time. And what happened is that as I had signed up for 2 weeks because I felt like that's what I needed to do, and that would kind of complete my coursework. And I really wanted to do that. And I only had one challenge. I only had enough money for 1 week. And I needed another $400. And Vicki said, well, why don't you just cancel the second week? And I thought about that, and I said, I don't know. I just, it doesn't feel right. That's the only thing I could say about it. But logic would have said cancel. And the Sunday before I was leaving on Monday morning, two of the congregants came into my office and said, and they were fairly new, and said, what's happening here means so much to me that we want to give you a gift, a personal gift. And they gave me $400. I don't take credit for drawing that to myself. I just take credit for staying in the belief that I was going to be there for 2 weeks. That's more intuitive than it is logic. And so as we grow in intuition, we grow in inner knowledge. As we grow in intuition, we immediately at times apprehend the spiritual truth. Immediately. Even if we've never read any books on spiritual truth, that will happen for you. And so what we have to understand is that we have to have the faith to follow the instruction that we get from our intuition. And I want to talk about that in a few minutes, just a little bit. Because you see, we have 12 powers. Now, when I first heard that in Unity, it was the first course I ever took, I didn't know what they were talking about, even after taking the course. The word bothered me. 12 powers, yeah, okay. Because I didn't understand the word power. And what it really is 12 gifts that you and I have been blessed with, that we've been created with. And some of those gifts that come into play when we go to the spiritual heart is faith, knowing that the invisible is more important than the visible, knowing that I can believe not what I see, but I can see what I believe. Big difference between the two. Knowing that love is the constant power, the glue that holds us all together. Knowing that spiritual understanding or wisdom is a power that we can take advantage of and use in very difficult circumstances. Intuitive knowing really comes from being in the Christ consciousness that Jesus demonstrated when he allowed the power of the Father, Mother, God to flow through him. That's what I think he was doing. He didn't take credit. When people said, "Oh, what a great Messiah you are," he says, "Not me." In his words, he says, it's the Father within that's doing the work. It's the Father within that does the healing. It's the Father within that produces your daily bread. It's the Father within that creates a prosperity consciousness. It's the Father within that allows you to know that heaven is within you. And so, you see, as this wisdom is revealed to us, it's revealed when we let go of the personal, the ego self, with its limited beliefs and awaken to the power of thinking from the heart. From the heart. Paul said in Ephesians, "Awake, you that are asleep, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall shine upon you." Now, as a kid, I heard that verse, and it was interpreted as that you have to die before you experience heaven. That was the interpretation. Metaphysically, it has a whole different understanding. Awake, you that are asleep. We have to awaken ourselves into a new consciousness if we want to heal. We have to awaken ourselves into a new consciousness if we want to experience prosperity. We have to, literally awaken ourselves into a new consciousness if we want to experience a relationship that's healthy and whole. Because in most cases, unless you're already there, it takes work, and it takes time, and it takes commitment. There is, as I've mentioned before, a tool proposed by HeartMath that I call Heart Freeze. And you touch and breathe. You remember and feel the memory. And then you ask yourself a question. What is the most effective way I can respond in this moment? In this situation, in my life, in this relationship? What's the most effective way I can respond? And that's when the wisdom of the heart kicks in. You will get the answer. How many people during the last month have gotten an answer when they've done that? Just raise your hands. Yeah, it works. It works. So what we do is we go to our heart space, that energy of the heart, and we simply close our eyes, and as we close our eyes, we literally take a deep breath. about a 5-second breath. And then when we do that, we remember that time, as we talked about in meditation, a time when you felt the love that you've always wanted, when you had an experience of awe, when you knew that God was there with you, and you felt that and you experienced that. Take on that feeling. Allow that feeling to literally enfold within you, because that is an inside job. And then you ask yourself, because you're now coherent. All studies are showing you're now coherent. This is a time to say, what is mine to do? What's the most effective way I can respond to this individual, to this situation, so that I can be unconditional love? And so some of you I know have already gone to that place, and I invite you back as we understand this tool called heart freeze. The more you do it, the more effective it becomes. If you're standing with somebody, I think I said this last week, you don't close your eyes. I mean, they think you're out to lunch, right? But if something's happening, you just think. You just think that I am in that heart space. I am moving into that heart space. And then you breathe very gently. Because you don't want to go in their face, right? That doesn't make any sense. They'd think you're a little crazy. But what you do is you just breathe gently. Now, all of that takes about 5 seconds, and they can still be talking. And then you remember and you feel. The more you do that, the quicker it will happen. So that takes a few seconds because you're used to it. You developed a habit. And then you say to yourself, what's the most effective way I can respond in this moment? And you'll get the answer. I'll guarantee you will get the answer, and you'll get the right answer. You see, sometimes we don't want to listen to our heart because it makes no sense. Let me just share with you that when I was coming to Richmond, Vicki and I were coming to Richmond, we had a checklist. This was the checklist. Plenty of parking. And we drove up and there was a sign, do not park on the property. Plenty of parking. That was really important. The second was that the church did not need a new furnace. Yep. And I went downstairs and actually looked and checked it off. Nope. And then another one was that the church itself didn't need to be renovated, so it wouldn't take us away from our goal. Because you see, we want to be a church without borders or without how do I say it? A church without something, walls. Thank you. A church without walls. Duh. A church without walls. And an important thing is not to focus all your concentration on the building, on the church building, to do that. What we found out is we can do both. So we had all these things checked off and nothing seemed to be right, except the most important thing. God said, this is where you're supposed to be. And many of you said, yes, you are welcome here. Thank God. And so all the stuff, if I had held on to that as important, I wouldn't be here now. Because there was a church that had lots of parking, had a pretty big building, supposedly fairly new, was calling me that weekend when I was here and saying, don't make a decision. And when Vicki and I drove away on Sunday afternoon, we knew we were called to be here. We had no doubt about it. And Peggy, as leader of the board, had the good sense to invite us here. Thank you, dear. And you had to go to your heart, I'm certainly. So what happens, you see, sometimes Spirit, wisdom, gives us an answer we don't want to hear. Or that we don't think we want to hear. So we have to overcome that and step into a habit of thinking from our heart. So create the habit of thinking from your heart. And the intuitive you, the spiritual understanding, the wisdom of Spirit in you will awaken within, and you will respond, not react, and you will see what you believe. Thank you.